Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. We had a fun day visiting Chris Hendry's place, the Bonsai Guy, and I bought a lot of pots, and now I've got to figure out what trees are going in what pots. We got a really good rain last night. It rained all night, and it totally filled up my cube, my IBC, interim bulk container water tank, so I'll show you that. The tank is filled right to the brim now. You can see the water level is right up here. So that's good and full. And it's a lot of weight. You can see down here that it's really squeezed into the plywood, the metal frame. So yeah, I'm glad I built a nice solid foundation with all these cement blocks down here for it, because that's a metric ton of weight bearing down. I've moved the larch forest and the cedar avatar grove back onto this bench, so my table's cleaned off now. So I'll get out the pots and I'll see what we have and try and kind of match a tree to each pot. I've recently repotted my very first bonsai, my Ficus microcarpa from seed, into the 3D printed pot. So the pot it was in is now left over, and it'll be interesting to compare an old pot to a new pot. A similar glaze on them, but this other pot is at least 25 years old, so let's get them side by side. Let's go in now and compare the two pots. So here's the old one. You can see the finish on it is very matte. It's not shiny like this one. You can see all my reflections in it, the table reflected in it. The old one is very matte, and that's probably handling over the years and like slightly rubbing the surface with your hands and that, and it puts micro scratches in the glaze and it becomes dull. So that's one big difference. There's also a lot of discoloration on this finish. You can see up the top here. Now some of that is probably staining from fertilizer and minerals in the water. But generally, you don't clean that off. If you clean that off, then, you know, I could clean this pot off and buff it to a mirror finish again. And that would be ridiculous. All I'd end up with is a brand new looking pot like this. That's why it shows, if you put too much oil on these pots, they go shiny and they look brand new. So if you have an old pot like this, it's better not to put the oil on it. Just to clean it up with soap and water, try and get it looking nice and neat. And then you've got like an old looking pot to match your old looking tree. If I turn the new pot over, you can see the clay underneath it's not totally uniform in color, at least not on this pot, but it's very clean looking, very new looking. If I overturn the old pot, you can see all the stains. The clay looks older. It's not that brand new clay color. It's definitely changed color as it's gotten older. So that's kind of cool to see. So you can see the feet here, they don't look new. And whereas these ones, you know, the clay is very uniform, new looking. Yeah, so that's a few differences in an old pot versus a new pot. Some people don't like patina and they don't like things to look old and aged. I think part of bonsai is you start with a young tree which looks kind of new looking, and through the years it gets age and character, and it's something we strive for in bonsai, is to get that develop character in our trees that make it really special. And I'm the same way with my pots. I like the fact it took 25 years to get this pot to look like that. I'm looking forward to watching this pot slowly develop patina over the years. And I like that with my vehicles. I like my old truck. I like it to look like an old truck. I don't want it to look shiny and brand new. And I also did some violin making, so patina in violins and any antique is just something you don't take away. If you have an antique piece of furniture, you don't strip all the old varnish off and refinish it to look like a brand new piece. And same with a violin. That's the value of it, is that patina and that age. And it's the same with bonsai pots and trees. You want them to show their age. You want something, a really old tree and pot, it should look like an old tree and pot, not something brand new. I'll continue to get all the rest of the pots out of the box and lay them out on the table, and then we'll have a good look at them. Here's a look at the pots, and I brought my sarissa out kind of to give these pots a bit of scale. So they're all fairly large pots. My sarissa is in a very big pot, and if I ever show this tree, I would have to put it in a smaller pot. That's kind of the only pot I had at the time. So it could probably go in this cream colored one, would look really good. I like desert trees in these cream colored pots. So that's a possibility. So all these pots are tokonami pots. So they're all good quality. They're, nice clay. They're very thin walled, fired at a high temperature. And they make a really nice ringing noise when you tap them. You can just tell they're alive, the sound of them. I'll bring the pot over and maybe you can hear. When I hear how they ring, they're almost musical. Feel that ring to them? Yeah, so they're like a bell. A cheap quality pot won't do that. I'll see if I have an example. Unfortunately, I don't have a low quality pot of kind of equal size to compare the ringtones to it, but they're not like that. They don't have that kind of higher pitch to them. They're more of a lower, a dull sound. So yeah, you can always tell a good quality pot by the feel of it, the thin walls, the sound of it, and when you tap them, they make a nice ringing sound. And also, if the pot is cracked, you can tap it and it'll make a dull sound instead of a bell-like sound. So that's how you can tell if a pot has a crack in it. Sometimes it's difficult to tell because sometimes the glazes will crack, and it's not the pot that's cracked, it's just the glaze cracking on the outside. So you can't really visually tell sometimes, but the ring test will tell you. When I started the channel, I always stress that you don't need a lot of money to get into bonsai. All you need is like a tree that you collect from the wild or start from seeds. You can use inexpensive tools, and you can grow your trees in seed trays. So here's my fusion ficus, or my Franken ficus, as an example. It's grown in a seed tray most of its life, a doubled up seed tray here, and it's starting to fall apart. You can see the corners are all broken away. So this is one of the trees that I want to get into a pot, and I knew the day would come. You can develop your trees in training pots, wooden boxes, seed trays, whatever you have. But the day does come when you want to put your tree in an exhibition. It's developed enough that it kind of deserves a high quality pot underneath it. So, I have a lot of trees that, like my cedar here, is just in a plastic tub. Someday, I'll have to buy a nice pot for it as it matures and develops. Even my bird's nest spruce here is in a plastic pot. And I've had this tree for over 25 years now. So it certainly deserves a clay pot, but someday, And I knew the day would come where I'd have to spend a lot of money on clay pots to put these, if I want to enter some exhibitions with the trees. So you can't have a seed tray pot underneath the tree in a major exhibition. So I knew the day would come where I'd have to spend a bit of money on the hobby, and I don't mind. I think, once you get a tree to develop to a certain level, even my Austrian pine here, it's just in a mica pot. This isn't a clay pot. So that probably deserves a clay pot in the future. So yeah, I knew that day would come. This one, my Ficus Fancy, it's in a plastic pot. So that's the reason I went and I purchased some pots at Chris Hendry's. All of the new pots are really good quality, and they would probably survive quite well outside in winter, but I would never risk them. They're just too expensive. Like that was $100, $80. I think that was $120. and this one was 80. And this one, I got 2 pots together, and that was long ago, 25 years ago. I got 2 pots for $75. So they're not cheap. I would hate to have them crack or break in winter. So if I did put a hardy tree in a clay pot, I would always slip it out of the clay pot for the winter, put it in a plastic or a mica pot, and then put it back in its clay pot for the summer. I just don't want to risk breaking an expensive pot. Now, to totally contradict that train of thought, I do have a Tokonami pot here that Usher gave to me. He didn't give it to me, he sold it to me for $20, and he told me I think he paid $600, maybe $800 for it. He got it in Japan when he was over there, and he brought it back on the airplane. And this pot has had my apple tree in it for many, many years, and it has been out in the cold, freezing, thawing, in the winter in the basement. It's seen all kinds of weather conditions, and it's never cracked. It's never failed me once. So maybe, you know, these really good quality pots, they're no trouble in winter. I know Chris Hendry, he always takes his trees out of the pots for the winter. So he takes all his trees out of the pots, puts them in the ground underneath the benches for the winter, and then leaves the pots there just dry, and then repots them in spring. So, and I know a lot of people that do that. So in an ideal situation, I would have almost an identical pot in mica, and I would slip the tree out of the clay pot into the mica pot for the winter, and then back into the clay pot for summer. But I don't think that's really an option. I'm going to take a look at all the pots and then try and pick a tree that will go in each one of these pots. So when I start the repotting in the summer, I'll know which tree goes with what pot. One of the first trees I want to get in a larger pot is my Brazilian rain tree. When I first got this tree, it was very small, and I put it in this pot, which was fine for it at the time. But now I want to allow the roots to spread in a nice radial pattern, give the tree more space so I can grow it larger, get a nice umbrella canopy on it. The Brazilian rain tree is a fast grower. I remember someone in the Toronto club saying that you can double the size of these trees each summer, and that's what I found, is that they grow like crazy, and they get really large quickly. And now you can keep them small, but if you want to grow them, they'll certainly grow. And you can see, since I put the tree outside this spring, all the light green is all new growth on it, and it's going crazy is the word, all over. It's just, and this is just going to continue to grow all summer. So I want to get that in a nice pot, a nice oval pot. So that is one tree I would like to repot into one of these newer pots. The Brazilian rain tree doesn't need, you know, one of these giant pots like it's in at the moment. So the smallest new one I have is that unglazed kind of dark brown pot, which is a really nice pot. Even that is probably a little big. So I may be doing some pot trading. I'm going to look around and see if I have a nice oval shaped pot that would fit the Brazilian rain tree. My Ficus microcarpa, the one I call Fancy here, is in this plastic pot, so it will probably get a new clay pot. So I will have this plastic pot left over, but that's kind of large for that Brazilian rain tree. I don't want to put it in too large a pot, or the soil stays wet too long and it's not good for the health of the tree. So you got to kind of match the size of the pot to the root base. So I've got to look around for a smaller pot. I've got this Japanese pot here, made in Japan, which is a nice pot, but it's not really a whole lot bigger than the pot it's in. It's kind of just a little bigger. So it would be better. I have this kind of square mica pot with the curved edges, but I don't want to waste a mica pot on a tropical tree. I'd rather put a hardy tree in there. So I'm going to keep looking. I've got this pot, which again is larger than the one it's in, but not a whole lot. It's about the same depth, and it's just a nice quality pot, thin-walled. So it would be certainly better than the pot it's in, but Still, I would like it slightly larger, sort of a flat oval if I can find one. My ficus cutting of a cutting is in a nice oval, shallow oval pot, Japanese pot, and it would be nice, but again, it's just a little small. I need something like this, just a little bigger. Over here, my Bayberry Forest never did recover from the winter. It totally died, which is too bad. Really like that forest. It's in a plastic training pot, a Japanese plastic pot, which would be a good size for that Brazilian rain tree to grow in. It's shallow. Yeah, again, it's plastic. I'd rather put a hardy tree in the plastic pot, but that's maybe the best size pot I've found yet. So that's a possibility. I think I finally found a pot. I had my spruce here, and I root pruned that spruce too much. First of all, it was kind of weak because it was pot bound in a smaller pot. And then I worked the roots too much and it just slowly died in the springtime. So that was kind of sad. However, it's in a 3D printed pot. And it is, I think, a really good size to put the Brazilian rain tree in. You can see it's longer, it's wider. That's awesome. So I could also paint this any color I want. I could put a glaze on it, paint a fake glaze on it if I wanted. Right now it's just kind of antiqued a bit to look like a clay pot, but it doesn't have to be that color. I could do whatever I want with it. So I think that's a good solution for the Brazilian rain tree. There is another possibility. I just remembered Tom from Grow and Clip Bonsai for Seniors, the YouTube channel, sent me some pots, some plastic training pots. So definitely deeper and not a whole lot bigger than the pot it's in. A little bit, but I don't think that's big enough. I think the 3D printed pot is the one. Yeah, okay. So that's what that's going to go in. So that doesn't solve anything today. I've still got all my new clay pots with no trees picked for them. I'll set the Brazilian rain tree and the new pot together on the bench so I remember when I go to repot it, what pot I'm putting it in. I'll get some more trees that need repotting and bring them over to the bench here and see how they fit in the new pots and see if they're suitable. I was thinking my Ficus Benjamina here, the Franken-ficus, could go in this, large rectangular pot. It would certainly be big enough. It's quite a bit wider, and I think lengthwise it's shorter, but it would certainly capture all the root base in the pot. In fact, I think it's even looking too big. So ideally a pot, I like the roots to kind of flow into the pot and then have some space before the lip of the pot. You don't want, your pot, the edge of the pot going right up to the edge of the root base. It looks too crowded. Got to give it a little breathing room. So I'm trying to see if some of these oval pots might look better. Let me move things around. Here's the new pot, and the cream colored one is the exact same pot, it's just a different color. So if I hold that up to the root base, it looks like it's plenty big enough for this tree, both widthwise and lengthwise. So that would be a good possibility. I'm not real keen on the color with the tree. You can see this green color doesn't really go with the tree at all. This is more of a, I'd say, bluey green. So maybe the cream colored pot would look better. Let me see that. This off-white color goes with the roots much nicer, especially when the ficus gets really old. The bark on them turns almost a white color. So these off-white pots tend to look pretty good with ficus. So I don't know, can I imagine it in that pot? Let me just try and set it up so we can get a glimpse of what it would look like in the cream colored pot. Let's see if I can get down low and maybe get a glimpse of what it would look like in the pot, maybe right there, eh? I'd have to move the pot over a bit. Yeah, that would look pretty good in that size pot. And the color's pretty good. And as I say, as the roots turn a little more of a whitish color, it'll match them even nicer. So yeah, I think that's the pot to go with my fusion ficus here. And I think the tree's developed enough that it should go in a nice pot. I think the days of this plastic seed tray pot are over for this tree. And it still has a lot of refining to go. Like, I just cut this back really hard recently, so all these new branches have come out, and then I've got to do branch selection and refine them. Right now, you know, there's multiple branches coming out from one spot, so the silhouette looks great. It looks full and dense, but the branch structure isn't there yet. It's not developed. It's a mass of branches, so it creates the illusion of a nice canopy, but definitely the structure's not there. If you saw this tree defoliated, you go, there's no branch structure there at all. So that's what I'll work on next. I'll be working on the branch structure in this tree, and I'll repot it into this new pot, but not yet. I have to wait till it gets really warm out. The sort of early to mid-summer is ideal. When the temperatures start getting warm at night, then you can repot a ficus without any problem. They don't even skip a beat. I'll put my fusion ficus with the new pot back on the bench together, and I'll repot them kind of early to mid-summer. I thought about putting my Sarissa in that cream-colored pot. It does get white flowers all over the canopy, and they would kind of match that pot, but not quite. The flowers are more of a white color. And when I kind of put the pot in front of it, it overpowered the tree. It was just visually too much for the pot. I think I'll have to pick a different pot for it. I'm going to try out that green one and see how it looks. All right, let's see how the green pot looks with the Sarissa. Kind of down low. Okay, so right away I noticed the pot is too deep. Generally you match the thickness of the trunk of the tree to the depth of the pot, and this trunk is much slimmer than the depth, and the pot just looks too big. It looks like a bathtub with the tree growing out of it, so that is too big. So I have some other choices. I have the pot that my ficus was growing in over here, a much thinner pot, plus it's got these ribs along it which even visually increases or decreases the depth of it even more. So when you have any kind of horizontal stripes on anything, it makes it look longer. So I'm going to try that pot in front of it. So that's a much better depth for the tree. I'll prop the pot up a bit. It's a little low, and we'll see what it looks like. All right, let's come down low now. So there it is. I think that's much, much better. Now I'm wondering, is it still too big? It's hard to tell because the pot's in front, so on the camera it looks much bigger than it actually is, but it is still quite a large pot for the tree. But it's better than the one it's in, that's for sure. You can see the size difference. If I line them up edge to edge here, I'm this much shorter, which is, you know, fairly significant. And looking down from the top, you can, well, I can see this new one is much smaller compared to the old one. It also has a lot thinner lip. This one kind of looks massive. So the only other possibility is this other one here, which is a smaller oval, but it is also fairly deep. But I'll try it and I'll have a look. All right, let's see if we can get a look at it now. So I like the size of the pot, but again, as you see, when you come down here, it looks way too deep. It's not suitable at all, the depth of it. But the size is a nice size for the tree. That's a good size for that oval. If it was just a little shallower, so maybe I don't have the ideal pot for this Sarissa at the moment. It would certainly be an improvement to put it in this pot, but this pot isn't perfect. However, you know, the tree is going to grow. This tree grows quite rapidly over the summer, so I could increase the canopy quite a bit, which would also thicken up the tree, but probably not to the point where it would look good in this depth of pot. It needs that You know, even this pot's shallower looking. So, yeah. Well, I'll decide in the summer. You know, the pot that it's in isn't the worst pot in the world. It's very simple, very plain looking. I don't think it does a lot for the tree. I think it's just okay, but I don't think it complements the tree. I think ideally, I would want a pot that's sort of the color of the bark there. So kind of the greenish, grayish brown color. It's got some flecks of darkness in it when it's wet. Even, you know, the bark up here has a lot of crevices which are quite dark. So I think I'll try and show you a pot that maybe has that color scheme to it. While I was looking around for this pot, I came across the pot that the Sarissa used to be in, this nice Japanese flat oval pot. And you can see how much larger the new pot that the Sarissa is in is compared to the old one. I can't believe it used to fit in this pot at one time. So I was thinking maybe this pot would be good with my Brazilian rain tree. Even though it's a very, very shallow pot. I mean, the trunk of my Brazilian rain tree is quite slim at the moment too. It would get a nice radial root spread going. Be nice and flat, and it would develop really nicely in this pot. So that's another possibility. So I'll also put this pot with the Brazilian rain tree. So at the present moment, the pot that my ficus used to be in is the best match for my Sarissa. So I'll put those two back on the bench together. I've got my Ficus microcarpa, the one with a fancy root base out. And I was thinking, well, will it pair up with this one okay? Let me see here. I think size-wise it's not bad. It's just a little bit smaller lengthwise than the plastic pot it was in. So I wouldn't want it any smaller. I wonder if it's too small. Widthwise it's larger, so you can see the pot it's in is quite a narrow oval, and this one's quite a large oval. So it would certainly have more room to grow front and back. And I could fit it in this pot, no problem. I'll try it in the larger rectangular pot and see what that looks like. So it just about fits in the new pot, the old pot. So it's, you know, a fair amount bigger. Now I am going to grow this canopy out larger, so I'm thinking it's a pretty good match. Even the color isn't bad. The color matches the leaf color quite closely. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's not bad. Yeah, I think that's the pot for that tree. And especially, you know, that canopy is just going to grow larger. I'm hoping the root base doesn't get a whole lot larger, but yeah, I think that's the pot for that tree. It looks really good in that. I think that's a match made in heaven. Okay, that's awesome. It looks really finished in that pot. I've never seen it in a kind of a nice pot before. Awesome. I'll put my Ficus microcarpa with the fancy root base back on the bench with its future new pot. I really like this oval unglazed pot. I think I'm going to really enjoy watching the patina develop on this pot over the future years. So I'm going to try and find a tree that would match this pot really nicely next. So the depth is about here, so it's got to be something with a fairly good sized trunk on it. Interesting. I was even thinking my Austrian pine. I've seen pines in oval pots before, shallow oval pots, and they look pretty good. And the root base on my Austrian pine is quite shallow. It could easily go in this pot quite comfortably. I'm going to try it out and see what it looks like, but that may not be the tree that goes with this pot eventually. Probably something more in the tropical line. Here's a look at the Austrian pine, and right away I think it's definitely too small a pot for the tree. If I hold it up, you can hardly see it there. Let me, I'll try and move the pot up, put some spacers under it, try and get an idea of what it would look like in an oval pot. Okay, let's come down now. Let's see. So there's an idea. So it looks too small to me. If it were to go in an oval pot, it would have to be deeper and also longer. It's The pot is almost the exact same width as the canopy, and you don't want that. You want the pot either to be a little smaller or a little larger than the canopy. You don't want those vertical lines lining up with the pot, edge of the pot and the edge of the canopy, and you can see it does it both sides. So that is definitely unsuitable. I brought out my hibiscus to see what that would look like in the pot, and I think it's not bad, but I think the pot's a little big for the tree. Like, it's not bad. Maybe that would be better. Right now, the pot that it's in, I feel it's just too crowded. It needs more roots. And this tree will get pruned back. This is all the winter growth on it. So it's going to be pruned back, so it's quite compact. And this, you know, it's quite a step going from this size pot to this size. It's a big difference. So it would cause a tree to really grow rapidly because the roots have room to expand. So it would certainly invigorate the tree, but I think it would be too drastic a change. I think, you know, somewhere in between these two pots would be ideal for potting it up a bit. So I don't think that's the, it's not a bad pot for it, but I don't think it's the perfect pot, but I'll look around some more. I've got my Ficus Benjamina out here, trying it with the new pot. Let's have a look. So my initial impression is it's a little large, but then this tree was cut back recently, so the canopy is quite small on it. Like, it's not a spreading tree. So when I look at the volume of the pot, it's not too much more than the old one. You know, it is a lot more, but it's not drastically. It's not twice the size or anything. So that might be a good tree to go in it. Right now, this ficus is in a plastic pot. I painted it up in one of the videos to give it some patina. And I guess it looks all right, but I would like to get it in a clay pot. A nice clay pot, because someday, you know, this will be a nice show tree as it matures and develops. So I think that's a good pot for it. And I think it'll grow into that pot. I think it's a good depth, it's a good size, and then as this canopy grows out, it'll look quite nice, and the trunk will thicken up and everything. So I think that's probably the tree that'll go in that pot. I looked around at all my other tropicals, and I thought, well, maybe this one, but this tree, it's quite happy in this pot, and it's not, it would look too small in the pot. It doesn't have the thick trunk on it or anything yet. All the rest of my trees look pretty comfortable in the pots they're in. So I don't think I have anything better. I think that would be the tree for that pot. I'll put my Ficus Benjamina with the new pot and put it back on the bench, and this will be its new home for the next probably 5 years. I'm having trouble finding a tree for the last pot I bought. This kind of green oval. This is the twin of the white one I had. There's the white one, and that was going to have the ficus, the Franken-ficus in it. So I think it'll look good in that pot. I brought out my Ficus plain, the one that has kind of a plain trunk. It would look okay in this pot. The pot it's just a little shorter than the one it's in, but it's wider, so it would certainly grow quite well on this pot. The pot it's in now is a plastic pot, so it'll be going into a nice clay pot. Let's have a look at it down low here. It looks quite fine in that pot. This tree is not ready for a show or anything yet. It's still early in the stages of its development, but it would certainly be nice to get it in a nice pot. So I think it would do fine in that pot. I think it looks quite nice in the pot. So I think that's probably the best tree I have for this pot. And that'll free up this other pot where I can start maybe another forest or something in it. I'll find something for it. So yeah, I think that's the only tree I have that would be suitable in this pot, other than starting a forest or something like that, which I could do in the future. So I think I'm going to match this pot with my Ficus plain, which I think by the end of summer you'll see this canopy developing better, and it should look quite nice. It's a little sparse at the moment. I pruned it back quite hard in the winter time, so, and right now it has a lot of leaf burn. It's getting used to full sunlight, so. But I think it has future potential, this tree, and I think it deserves a clay pot. I'm going to reserve my cream-colored pot here, the larger one, for my aloe. The aloe, when it first went in this pot, it was a big pot for it, and it grew like crazy. And then the roots kind of filled the pot, and the growth started slowing down. So instead of the great big leaves on it, they started getting smaller. And you can see they're quite fine now, you know, compared to a typical aloe leaf. So it's starting to actually bonsai the foliage, which is kind of exciting. So I eventually want to grow this even larger because I really like it. I think it's just fascinating, all the structure in the aloe, all the aerial roots and that. So I really like it. So I think, you know, the final stage for this tree will be to put it in the larger pot, and that'll be its final resting place. I don't think I'll ever grow it larger than that. And then I can find something for the smaller pot, another tree. Because we got rain last night, I moved all the succulent trees into the greenhouse last night, keeping them out of the rain, because it did rain the entire night. So that'd be too much water around the roots, and I didn't want them rotting away. So now that the rain's over, I can take all those back outside on the benches. I think I have a good plan for the summer repotting season. I've got all the trees matched with their pots. And that's all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.